In early 2023, shipments of olive oil from Spain dropped by nearly 50% due to drought. The result? U.S. grocery stores saw prices surge 39% in just months. Then came India's rice export ban overnight. The price of jasmine and basmati rice in American supermarkets jumped by over 30%. And most recently, global container freight costs have surged again, with the average 40 FT shipping container price rising from $1,400 to over $3,000. That cost doesn't just hit electronics, it hits the food aisle. These aren't rare exceptions, they're warning signs. And the items at the greatest risk aren't luxury goods, they're the everyday things sitting in your pantry or under your sink. Things made overseas, packaged overseas, or shipped using long, fragile routes that most shoppers never even think about. In this video, we'll show you 8 everyday items that could skyrocket in price overnight, not based on theories, but based on the exact same patterns that already drove up the cost of olive oil, rice, coffee, garlic, and more. If you saw any of those vanish or spike this year, this list will feel very real. Subscribe now. This is the kind of list you won't want to discover after the shelves are empty. Number 1. Sardine tins. They used to sit on shelves collecting dust until the last few years proved just how powerful they really are. Sardine tins are compact, shelf-stable, protein-packed, and require zero cooking or refrigeration. That makes them one of the most valuable survival foods during any grid disruption or import shock. And in 2025, they're already becoming harder to find. Here's why. Over 75% of canned sardines sold in the U.S. are imported, primarily from Portugal, Morocco, Thailand, and the Philippines. The U.S. simply doesn't produce enough domestically to meet demand. And due to rising ocean freight costs, plus container shortages from Asia to Europe, these small protein tins are being deprioritized in shipping routes just like many other low-cost heavyweight imports. In fact, several major U.S. distributors have recently confirmed delays in restocking sardines and other canned fish. Online retailers like Amazon and Walmart.com are already tagging some brands as limited stock or unavailable in your region. And if you've walked into a store lately and noticed fewer tins on the shelf, you're not imagining it. Prices on premium sardine brands have risen nearly 30% since early 2024, and the cheaper ones are just gone. What makes this worse is how sardines become critical the moment something goes wrong. They don't need heat, they're ready to eat. They're rich in omega-3 second, healthy fats, and long-lasting energy, something you can't say about most pantry items. And in a blackout or food crisis, protein becomes the first thing people scramble for. But once the shelves are empty, it's too late. You either have them or you don't. And you'll wish you had grabbed a few more tins when they were still sitting there for $1.29. They might not look like much, but when the lights go out and the fridge stops humming, sardines turn into gold in a can. And if imports keep falling, they'll be one of the first proteins to disappear quietly and completely. Number 2. Aluminum foil rolls. It's not just for covering leftovers. In a blackout or supply chain disruption, aluminum foil becomes one of the most multifunctional survival tools in your home and one of the fastest to vanish from store shelves. Why? Because most people underestimate it, but preppers don't. Foil can be used to cook over an open flame, reflect heat in freezing temperatures, preserve food, line makeshift pans, build signal reflectors, and even block out light for blackout protection. In a power crisis, especially in colder states, foil becomes a thermal tool wrapped inside windows, walls, or even clothing to reflect and trap body heat. And once word spreads, it disappears fast. But the bigger issue is where it comes from. Over 80% of the raw aluminum used in U.S. foil production is imported, mostly from China, India, and Bahrain. The rolling and packaging happens in the States, but without that raw aluminum, the shelves stay empty. And with ongoing shipping delays, port slowdowns, and global aluminum price spikes, foil rolls are already feeling the pressure. In early 2025, import data from the U.S. Census Bureau showed a 10% year-over-year drop in aluminum imports, driven by tariff adjustments and international production slowdowns. That's not just bad news for construction, it hits consumer goods hard, especially low-margin items like foil, which are often deprioritized in container shipments. Meanwhile, brands like Reynolds, Great Value, and Kirkland are already shrinking box sizes quietly or limiting bulk pack availability. Warehouse stores like Costco have seen temporary stockouts across several states, and those gaps aren't random. They're part of a wider trend. Aluminum foil isn't being restocked as fast as it's being bought. So if you're assuming that shiny silver box will always be waiting in aisle 5, don't. When the lights go out, aluminum foil will be worth its weight in function. And those who stock up early won't just be prepared. They'll be the ones everyone else turns to when the foil runs dry. Number 3. Latex cleaning gloves. They're cheap, they're overlooked, and in a crisis, they're one of the first things to run out, especially when sanitation becomes your first line of defense. Latex cleaning gloves might seem like a background item on grocery shelves, but during every major emergency, from the 2020 pandemic to the 2021 Texas freeze, these gloves became nearly impossible to find. Not because people suddenly started deep cleaning their homes, but because survival gets messy. And when water, heating, or plumbing systems fail, you're forced to handle waste, mold, chemicals, and even human hygiene without protection. That's when gloves go from optional to essential. What most people forget is that the U.S. imports nearly all of its latex glove supply. The biggest manufacturers, including Top Glove, Hartalega, and Supermax, operate in Malaysia, Thailand, and China. And during global demand spikes, those countries prioritize their own needs before shipping out bulk to U.S. distributors. Even a minor disruption at one of their ports can lead to weeks of domestic shortages. In fact, as of mid-2025, new restrictions on synthetic latex exports from Southeast Asia have already caused price hikes across several U.S. states. Retailers like Walmart, Walgreens, and Target have quietly raised prices on disposable gloves by 15-20% since Q1 of this year, and multi-pack boxes are being phased out in some locations in favor of smaller, single-use packages. Why? Because when freight rates climb and availability drops, stores shrink the shelf space for non-essentials, and latex gloves until crisis hits are treated like they don't matter. But ask anyone who lived through a flood cleanup, a blackout-induced sewage backup, or even just weeks without running water. You'll wish you had gloves, dozens of them. Because once the stores are empty, handling the mess becomes your job with bare hands or not. And by then you won't be thinking about the price, you'll just want protection. Number 4, crackers and biscuits. They may not look like survival food, but when imports collapse, dry shelf-stable snacks like crackers and biscuits become gold. Why? Because they're ready to eat, require zero prep, and comfort the body and mind in high-stress scenarios. During the pandemic, these were among the first items to vanish from grocery aisles, not because people were hoarding snacks, but because families needed something quick, familiar, and filling when fresh food wasn't an option. But here's what most don't realize. The U.S. imports a significant percentage of its crackers, biscuits, and wheat-based snack goods, especially premium or affordable bulk brands. Companies like LU, France, Arnott's, Australia, Balsan, Germany, and even some of Costco and Trader Joe's house brands rely on foreign wheat, palm oil, or cocoa-based ingredients sourced from Malaysia, Indonesia, Ukraine, and Canada. Right now, with tariffs rising and import bottlenecks increasing, those raw materials and the finished goods themselves are taking longer and costing more to reach U.S. shores. In fact, as of July 2025, wholesale distributors in New Jersey and California reported a 28% decline in imported biscuit stock, with prices rising quietly across shelves. Stores are reducing inventory, prioritizing local brands, or eliminating slow-moving international snack lines altogether. That means when the next crisis strikes, whether it's a shipping delay, natural disaster, or inflation spike, the biscuit aisle will be one of the first to feel it. Because in tough times, you're not reaching for gourmet ingredients. You're reaching for whatever's shelf-stable, lightweight, and easy to ration, and crackers fit that bill perfectly. They pair with canned meat, make a meal out of peanut butter, and keep kids calm when there's nothing else to eat. They're compact, last for months, and don't require power or heat to use. But once the shelves are cleared, they won't be easy to replace, not unless you've already stocked them. Because in an import-driven world, even something as simple as a biscuit can vanish without warning. Number 5, soy sauce, premium Asian brands. It might seem like just a flavor booster, but when the supply chain collapses, soy sauce becomes a high-demand, essential most households didn't stock enough of. Here's why. The U.S. imports a massive portion of its soy sauce, not just from China and Japan, but also from manufacturing hubs in Thailand, Taiwan, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Even popular brands that are bottled in America, like Kikkoman or Lee Kum Kee, still rely heavily on imported raw ingredients like fermented soybeans, wheat, and rice vinegar, all of which are sourced globally. And right now, those supply lines are under threat. Following a spike in U.S. import tariffs and shipping congestion across the Pacific in early 2025, several Asian food distributors have already reported container delays of 4-6 weeks, with some shipments outright canceled. Add to that rising costs in packaging materials like glass bottles and plastic caps, and the end result is simple: less soy sauce on shelves and higher prices when it does show up. In fact, one California-based importer stated that the average wholesale price for mid-tier soy sauce brands has jumped 23% since May, with no guarantee of stability going into the holiday season. But here's what most people forget: soy sauce isn't just a condiment. It's also one of the most versatile survival ingredients in any pantry. Why? Because in a blackout, power outage, or supply crunch, you're forced to make bland staples, stretch rice, canned beans, noodles, even powdered potatoes. Soy sauce turns those bland emergency foods into meals you can actually tolerate, and when morale is low, food that tastes decent makes a huge difference. Plus, soy sauce doesn't spoil quickly. It's shelf-stable for years, doesn't require refrigeration, and comes in compact packaging that stores easily in bulk. But here's the catch: once the import line goes dry, it'll be weeks or even months before a restock arrives. And most local stores don't carry large reserves of international condiments. That's why before prices jump again, it makes sense to add a few extra bottles to your prepping pantry now. Because when flavor disappears, so does comfort, and in a real crisis, that matters more than you think. Number 6. Beeswax candles. Most people think candles are just for dinner tables or cozy vibes, but in a blackout, they instantly become lifelines. And among all types, beeswax candles are the most powerful prepping tool nobody talks about. Here's why. Unlike cheap paraffin candles, beeswax burns longer, cleaner, and safer. A single 9-inch beeswax taper can burn up to 10 hours, compared to 4-5 hours for the standard ones. That's double the light, with half the worry. And in 2025, they're becoming harder and pricier to find. Beeswax is a natural byproduct of beekeeping, and it's mostly sourced from domestic and imported apiaries, especially from Canada, India, Mexico, and parts of South America. But climate instability has hit global honeybee populations hard. U.S. honey production dropped 15% year over year in early 2025, and commercial beekeepers are now prioritizing honey yields over wax exports. That means fewer beeswax blocks for candle makers, and more candles going out of stock in hardware and prepping stores. At the same time, demand is exploding. After the Texas grid collapse in 2021 and California's rolling blackouts in 2024, more Americans have started keeping backup candles, but most grab the cheap ones. The smart ones go for beeswax because they last longer and don't release the toxic soot that paraffin candles do in enclosed spaces. And let's not forget, in a real collapse, you won't be using candles for just light. You'll need them for warming up small spaces, drying clothes in cold rooms, melting wax to seal containers, even basic morale when everything feels dark. And here's what people miss: stores don't carry many. Beeswax candles aren't mass-produced at the same scale. Once they're gone, they're gone. So if you're prepping for anything power outages, natural disasters, or grid failures, now is the time to stash a few boxes. They're not just candles. They're backup security, calm in the chaos, and comfort when the lights go out. Number 7. Imported bar soap. French, Turkish, or African origin. It might look basic. It might cost just cents. But when supply chains fall apart, bar soap becomes one of the most powerful survival tools in your home. And right now, it's dangerously underestimated. In a crisis, cleanliness isn't about comfort, it's about disease prevention. During every major collapse in history, from World War trenches to the hurricane-ravaged cities of the Gulf, the biggest killer wasn't gunfire or starvation, it was infection. And without hygiene, you're giving bacteria an open invitation. Now, here's the problem. America imports millions of bar soaps every month from countries like Indonesia, China, and Turkey. These aren't luxury items. These are the basic, affordable bars you find at Walmart, Dollar Tree, and major grocery chains. But as import lanes tighten due to fuel costs, port slowdowns, and labor shortages, the price of a single bar has already jumped in some regions. And what most people don't realize is during disasters, liquid soap becomes useless fast. Pumps break, bottles get messy, storage is awkward. But a bar of soap? It's compact, lasts weeks, and requires no packaging or dispenser. Even FEMA's own emergency kits recommend keeping bar soap on hand, not liquid. Why? Because bar soap stores better, doesn't freeze in the cold, and doesn't spill in your bug-out bag or emergency tote, and that's just the start. In a prolonged crisis, bar soap serves more than just sanitation. You can use it for shaving, wash dishes or laundry when supplies run out, rub on zippers or drawers as a lubricant, mark surfaces for repairs or cuts, even trade it as barter because it's lightweight, essential, and recognizable. Here's what's scary when panic sets in. People never stock bar soap. They go for food, water, and flashlights, and completely ignore hygiene. But in the second week of a blackout, when skin infections, food residue, and human odor build up, that overlooked bar becomes more valuable than most realize. So don't wait until it's gone. Stock up now, while it's still cheap, because you can live without power, but you can't survive long without staying clean. Number 8. Vacuum seal food storage bags. In normal times, vacuum seal bags are just another convenience in your kitchen drawer. But in a crisis, they become one of the smartest, most overlooked survival tools you could ever own. These simple plastic bags, when used properly, can extend the shelf life of food by months, even years. And right now, with the threat of rising food prices, import disruptions, and widespread blackouts, these bags aren't just practical, they're essential. Most people don't realize how much of their emergency food supply goes to waste because of one thing: air exposure. Oxygen and moisture are the enemies of preservation. Even if you've stocked up on dry goods like rice, beans, flour, or pasta, if they're sitting in flimsy packaging, you're losing value by the day. But vacuum sealing removes that risk. It pulls the oxygen out, compresses the storage size, and protects against freezer burn, insects, mold, and moisture damage. And that protection could be the difference between feeding your family or throwing spoiled food in the trash during an emergency. Here's where things get serious. A large portion of vacuum seal bags sold in the US are imported from manufacturing hubs in China, Vietnam, and South Korea. And thanks to ongoing freight delays, raw material shortages, and import tariffs, restocking is getting harder and more expensive by the month. Warehouse suppliers are already reporting limited availability of bulk food storage gear, especially the heat-resistant multi-layered bags preferred by long-term preppers. If another shipping disruption hits, whether from port closures, fuel blockades, or conflict in key sea routes, these bags could vanish from the shelves without warning. What's worse? Most households don't keep more than 1 or 2 rolls on hand, if any. And yet, these bags can store meats, vegetables, dried fruits, grains, cheese, snacks, even non-food items like important documents or medical supplies. When sealed correctly, they're waterproof, airtight, compact, and stackable. They don't require electricity after sealing, and they pair perfectly with solar-powered vacuum sealers or hand pumps, both of which are already selling out on survival gear websites. In a blackout or extended crisis, having extra food is great, but keeping it fresh is survival. And without vacuum seal storage, you're gambling with every bite. These aren't luxury gadgets. They're quiet plastic insurance policies for your pantry. And the smart ones are stocking up now, before the next wave of shortages hits. So here's the truth: most people ignore the next crisis, won't send a warning. There won't be a headline that says, "Stock up today or suffer tomorrow." It'll just hit, fast, hard, without mercy. And by then, the shelves will already be empty, the items you took for granted gone, the prices you once complained about, now 10x higher if you're lucky enough to find them at all. That's the reality we're walking toward, not because we're alarmists, but because the signs are everywhere, from import delays and rising tariffs to warehouse shortages and store-wide rationing. And every week we wait, the options shrink a little more. This isn't about fear, it's about being ready before everyone else realizes it's time. So if this video opened your eyes even just a little, don't scroll away. Hit the like button, drop a comment, and tell us what you're quietly stocking up on. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve with real, no-fluff updates on what's vanishing next, then subscribe now. Because next week, next month, or even tomorrow, The difference between having it and missing it might just be a single video you didn't watch in time.